go ahead and introduce yourself, Tony. Tell us a little bit about who you are.
Sure. My name's Tony Peckham, Anthony on screenplays and novels. And I have been writing professionally for nearly 40 years now. So I've forgotten a lot. But I came to California as a graduate student and went to film school. I loved films. We grew up without TV in South Africa, which is where I was born and raised. So I read. All we had was books and movies. And movies were a huge deal. You used to dress up to go to movies. They were a massive deal, and we loved them. And once I discovered that movies started with a screenplay, I was like, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
I love writing, I love books, but I want to write movies. So I took my Bachelor of Honors degree from the University of Cape Town and carried it to San Francisco State University in California. I didn't get into UCLA or USC. And really, there was no internet back then either. So we couldn't gather information in the way you do today. But I was grateful to get into a really good film school, actually.
Okay.
I would plug that. It's not as Hollywood oriented as the others. So you'll get a lot of documentary, a lot of experimental stuff. But I had teachers who loved genre films and loved screenplays. And that's what I love.
Yeah.
And I just started writing. I'd already written a bad novel, and so I knew I could finish something,
Sure.
which is really important. A lot of people can't. A lot of really talented people can't finish things. I discovered that in film school. And I just put my head down and began writing and sold a script to a local business person and teacher who wanted to start an independent movie company. And he liked one of the scripts I wrote in class enough to buy it. And I used that sale to get an agent because I didn't complete the sale. I just started phoning people, agents in the phone book, of which there were like three in San Francisco, and just said, "This guy wants to buy my screenplay. Will you help me do the deal?"
Yeah.
And of course, I brought the deal to them.
For
So
sure.
so I got a really nice agent. And then, as one does in the business, as you climb the ladder, you trade agents up. And
Yeah.
but that was the beginning, was selling a screenplay. It was affirmation that what I could write was what somebody would want to watch. And from then on, I slowly worked my way into the studio system, starting with independent movies and independent companies. And one of my favorite gigs very early on was this non-signatory gig before I was a member of the guild, where these guys came to me and said, "We've got 10 grand, we're making a movie in Mexico, we need a script in 3 weeks. Can you do it?" And I said, "Of course I can." And because 10 grand was a lot of money back then.
Yeah.
And then they said, "You've got all the guns you want, we've got motorcycles, you've got a half a day of a helicopter, oh, and three hand grenades." So it was an action movie. And they had a real actor by the name of Steve Railsback, and it actually got made and released, and you can find it. It's called The Assassin.
Yeah.
It was crazy writing though, like 3 weeks, that's all. I had 3 weeks, and they were like, "This is great, we're off." Because I used all the props they gave me
Yeah.
and that they had lined up, and off they went to Mexico to make the movie.
That's crazy. I
And
saw that on your credits list. I was like, the assassin. I'm
yeah, yeah,
interested in
yeah,
this.
yeah, it was crazy, but really fun, right? When you're young, you're just like, "Oh, 3 weeks? That's a lot of time to write a screenplay. Let's go." And then the doubt monkey doesn't ever climb onto your shoulder
Right.
because we all carry the doubt monkey on our
Oh,
shoulder. And it, and
bad.
it and it chitters in your ear the whole time.
Yep.
So from then on, I just worked my way into the studio system. And at that time, once you were in the system and didn't shit the sheets too badly, you would get more jobs. And I was very lucky to be working and living at a time when there were lots of studios, lots of the development process was still generous and available. The people you were writing for actually loved movies. They weren't business people necessarily. Even the CEOs of the companies loved movies. They all watched movies, they loved movies, they went to movies. And At a certain point, that started changing.
Yeah, I
Once,
think that's
once,
obvious.
yeah, once studios became more corporate, and once they tried to standardize movie making,
Mm,
and that the creative part of it became a necessary evil rather than the reason to do it. Suddenly you're pitching to people who you can tell don't like reading scripts, don't like watching movies. They're there to manage risk. And that's where we are now, to a great extent, I think,
yeah,
is managing risk rather than embracing
activity and just
creativity.
the mystery of
Um,
that because it's certainly a mysterious endeavor, but that's what makes it so fun.
yeah,
I even in my own writing, my fear is that because the lack of risk people are willing to take now, will this ever actually become a career for me? I have no idea.
the thing is, I think, if I may,
Sure,
I think first of all, it's not healthy anymore to think of your career as a Hollywood career.
sure,
Because Hollywood doesn't really exist in the way it used to anymore. But as a movie career, there is ample opportunity for independent stuff still.
yeah,
Movie making has actually gotten cheaper as technology has gotten smaller and easier, and you can literally shoot a movie on an iPhone and it'll look good.
yeah.
I I wouldn't lose heart so much as I would diversify who I'm writing for.
Okay,
And at the end of the day, it just has to be good. It doesn't
yeah,
matter who you're writing for. If it's really good, it they're rare. It's easy to write bad scripts. It's
sure,
still not easy, and that's true of all art and all endeavor, human endeavor, really. It's easy to write bad scripts. It's really hard to write good scripts or scripts that just fire, you know?
Mhm.
And that's what I would focus on. For my, I teach some classes and with beginning screenwriters, and will continue to do that. And they always ask, What's your first piece of advice?" And my first piece of advice always is, you only ever get one shot. If you get to show someone a screenplay, someone who matters or who can help you a screenplay, never show them a work in progress. It has to be the best possible version of that script you can ever do. Because they'll never read it and go, "Oh, this has potential, but it needs work." They'll just read it and go, "It's not there yet," and throw it away.
Yeah,
So that piece of advice will never change. You can show stuff to people who are already your allies, but in terms of if you get a meeting with such and they want such and such at Netflix, you have to show them a script that works.
yeah. I think that's been the nice part of this process is, as you said, like the ally aspect of it is, I did have a short screenplay recently. It was a short, about 15 pages. That might be more of something I approach as a director because I would like to direct, and I have directed some in the past, the last few years. But it got selected to the Austin Film Festival, which was a nice vote of confidence.
Yeah.
It's still not a feature. And I'm developing that where I do have this draft and trying to find the right people who can be honest with me before I do send it to somebody that can toss it or keep it.
Yes, you're gonna have to you find those people over time. And it's the people who'll be honest with you,
Yeah.
not the people who will tell you you're wonderful. So it's not your mom. Or unless your mom's already also a creative and understands that what's needed here is ruthless honesty, not blowing smoke.
Sure.
I do a thing though on everything I write that is very helpful as a sort of ally adjacent thing. Is I have someone that I read my scripts to out loud.
Okay.
It's a real investment for them, right? An investment of time for them, and it's hard to hear. So you want to develop yourself as a reader, for one thing. And it's amazing as you're reading. So it's the physical act of reading your script out loud. You'll suddenly realize that a scene is too long. That as you're reading it, you'll go, I want to get out of this scene. And sometimes even as you're reading it, you go, I'm going to stop right here. And there's still three-quarters of a page left,
Yeah.
and you'll find yourself jumping to the next scene. It's an incredibly valuable tool, is reading out loud. You hear your dialogue for the first time, generally, not just in your head. And even if you're doing all the characters yourself, it's amazingly valuable tool. So but it has to be for someone, right? You're
Sure.
reading to someone. You can't read to yourself in an empty room. So if you're in a writer's group, you can trade that off. And it's almost not so much you want their feedback, though you do. It's really you hearing yourself read your work is a really great test of the work.
Yeah. That
Um,
makes sense.
so that's it's like a physical thing you can do that's super helpful.
And that
Um,
does, it makes sense because when I read to my kids, there is a particular rhythm and a cadence that people attach to, whether that be on screen or reading a novel. There is, if you want to call it a beat in a
yeah,
sense.
and you can tell when stuff is sagging,
Yeah.
when it's gotten flabby, very quickly. I highly recommend that.
Where do you find yourself leaning when it comes to ideas and inspiration?
It's always a war in a way between your conscious and logical mind and your instincts, right? But actually, before I answer that question properly, or
Sure.
I want to go to one of your last questions, which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
if you could give one piece of advice to your younger self starting out, what would it be? I would say, and it speaks to how do you recognize when an idea has potential, right? You have to develop your own taste. You have to develop taste. You can't receive taste from other people. So know what you like, know what turns you on. Go to movies, read books, read scripts. If you can get them, read the scripts of movies you love to find out and slowly, it's just a process of experience that you might as well start today, is
Hmm.
developing your own taste. Because in the end, you have to write to please yourself. It's a mistake I made that I wish I'd gotten to this place sooner myself, which is not to try and please the people who are paying you or the people you think you're writing for. It's only going to be good if you like it.
Sure.
If you're liking it, it'll be good. It has a better chance of being good anyway. So have taste and then exercise your taste as you're writing and go to the gladiator line. Are you not entertained? If
Yeah.
you are not entertained yourself, chances are no one else will be.
Sure.
So develop your taste. So it doesn't mean trust yourself with no basis for that trust. You have to have developed your sense of taste.
Yeah.
Super important. The really successful people in Hollywood that I brushed up against through my career all had a really acute sense of taste, and it was independent. Often that you're hoping there's a Venn diagram between your taste and general taste or the communal taste of the industry. There better be a Venn diagram somewhere in there, but it doesn't have to be one for one. Anyway, so then how do I recognize when an idea has potential? Part of that is informed by taste, my taste. And the first thing is always instinctive. Does that give me that prickle, that ex prickle of excitement, that sort of ooh? And then you can lay your conscious and logical mind and your sort of commercial mind across that idea without squashing it immediately. But if an idea, for me, always, because I love writing and will always write, that prickle is the first thing, and I'm sure it is for everyone else. And
Yeah. You're right, because I do experience that where that general sense of excitement, even though it might be challenging, like the thing I'm writing right now, it's been challenging, but really that just from a self-doubt, and I can still override that because I'm still excited to write the story.
but the craft is always a challenge, right? Nothing ever goes perfectly. And that's when you lean on your craft, but that prickle needs to be there in the beginning and be able to be reignited throughout the process. And then that's also part of when I can't stop thinking about it.
Yeah.
When you can't stop thinking about an idea, I'm a notebook guy. I always have a notebook with me. I don't like putting everything on my phone because I can't write fast enough and I can't make
Yeah.
circles and go like this and that. And if I'm starting to write things and I'm starting to hear dialogue and then stuff starts dropping in, then you've got to go with that. And then at a certain point, and then once you have agents and managers and that, so you pitch them an idea and if they say, oh, one of those is being made at this studio and one of those has just been picked up at another, it's not going to help you. then maybe you have to rethink that from a professional point of view. But it never goes away generally. I've looked at ideas from 30 years ago that I just and you always have to write them down.
Yeah.
Always, always. Even if you shelve it, the reason it made you excited in the beginning probably doesn't go away. I pulled stuff out of a drawer, like the novels I've just been writing, the trilogy. That was an idea that started as a bedtime story on a
Yeah.
road trip. And then I wrote a few chapters and put it away for 15 years.
Wow.
And
Wow.
then during COVID, I was just bored out of my skull, and my wife said, "Please go in your office and write something, and just leave us alone." And I pulled it out and started rereading it, and the writing made me cringe because I'm a better writer now. But the idea was still there. It was like, "Oh, there's something here. Let's get to work on this."
Yeah.
So keep all the anything that makes you prickle, write it in a book, have it just be in that book, or write it however you write things down and keep them. Books are safer. Platforms disappear.
Yeah.
And digital is not safer than paper. And sometimes it's just a title. It's a cool title. I don't know what it's about, but it's a cool title. So but it's that prickle.
Yeah.
You listen to that prickle. Anyway, and so, yeah, that's a long answer to the first question.
It's a
But
good one
that's
though.
almost the most important question, right?
Yeah.
Because if you don't love what you write, there are writing jobs where it's a job and you do the best you can do within the boundaries of the job. But if you're generating for yourself, if you don't love it, it's not going to work.
From the idea, whatever, however that hits you, are you more focused on, do you dig into plot first? Do you think about characters and how do you balance the approach there?
Any and all are different depending on the project.
Yeah.
You don't, at this point, conception and inspiration, I don't think you're thinking about the sort of finer points of plot and structure as much as for a screenplay, if a bunch of set pieces bust into my head, or then you find a way to put them, you find a way to try and use many of them, at least, if not all of them.
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
I think Baby Driver,
Yeah.
just it started as a soundtrack
Oh, I didn't know that.
before it was a movie. You never know. I guess the other thing to say, and this sounds mystical, but it's not, is really just be receptive.
Yeah.
Don't be closed off as a person creatively.
There is so much inspiration and it's so cool. My dad would pick the most random things. We'd be driving down the car or down the road and he would just make quick little short dialogues between two birds that he saw flying in the sky. When we live out in the South here in Alabama, and so everything's covered in kudzu.
Yeah,
My son asked me this ravine covered in kudzu at our house, and he said, "Dad, what's down there?" And I said, "The Kudzu King." And from there, it has birthed this entire lore about the Kudzu King behind our house. And it was like you said, just being receptive. We were out on a walk, and it just hits you,
right.
and don't not being so dismissive of these things that are around you.
I suppose the word is to be sensitive, not as a weeping person in the fetal
Yeah,
position under the table, but be sensitive to stuff out there.
yeah,
I think it's a great disadvantage that we don't really read newspapers anymore. So that because I often used to just read these weird little stories and clip them out of you get these weird stories, but now everything's curated in a way and is received visually in a way that doesn't allow my imagination
yeah,
into the story. So I would still, if someone's starting out, I would still find a newspaper to read, find stuff to read because it gives you room
yeah,
in a way that something coming over social media or your TV or whatever, it doesn't give you room.
yeah,
So that's another way of being sensitive and looking for stories and just you have to go into the world. Our job as writers is to live in the world, not live in our rooms. And as soon as you have kids, you understand that you're living in the world now.
yeah,
And so our job is to live in the world and bring stories back, find stories and bring stories back, and then reshape them or just tell them. So. That's another thing we do. That's one of our sort of intangible, they don't teach you this at film school type of things, is how to be in the world as a writer or as a creative person. It's
Absolutely.
really important, especially if you want to be original rather than just derivative of someone else's creative ideas, which many people are. And you can make a good living that way, reproducing what's already worked, but with a slight tweak. So yeah, that's what I would say, and it's what I tell people who want to start out. What do you watch? What do you read?
Yeah.
Where do you go? Who do you speak to? Do you speak to anybody? Do you
Yeah.
ride public transport and listen to conversations? You should. Do
Coffee
you have a
shop
note?
talks, things like that.
Yes, exactly. When you go out for when you go out to the diner, have you got a notebook and a pencil so that when someone says something really amazing next to you, you can write it discreetly, write it down.
Yeah.
That's how good dialogue comes too. You hear something that's amazing, you write it down, and it never looks like it sounded on the
Yeah.
page. And so that's how dialogue starts, is like,
The idea that you start late and finish early. And so there's so much sort of implicit mystery when you're just listening to conversations that you happen to fall into.
right.
And it just beckons that curiosity. It's like you're not listening to the entirety of the conversation. You're just
No,
listening to little snippets that could lead somewhere, which is the basis of a scene.
right.
It's carrying that interest over.
And it's not so much that you're a lurker.
Yeah.
It's really that, oh, why, what did that person say that just made me listen?
Yeah.
What was it about this scene next to me that suddenly made me pay attention to it? Did they slam the table? Was there a word or a line or a phrase that suddenly was like, oh, that's interesting? So if you're open and if you're sensitive in the creative way, then you will start hearing that stuff. And no matter what, whether you use it or not, it makes your writing better.
So, when you're writing dialogue, what are you trying to do? What is the main goal of dialogue for you? I know writers have a different idea and different style about how they approach dialogue, but if you were teaching dialogue, how would you tackle that?
First of all, I would probably say that dialogue is music. It's about rhythm. It's not about information. A lot of people use dialogue to impart information, and that's deadly dialogue in general. Of course, it has information, but it can't feel as if it's being shoveled in there. And so when you get dialogue, and dialogue between two people is the easiest, which is why most scenes are two-handers, but at least two, three, four people, you start getting dialogue as rhythm, then that draws you in words as so to me it's music and poetry before it is information.
Okay.
Because I think information should come from images
Yeah.
rather than dialogue. Char Character comes from dialogue. Of course, there are always scenes where there is, say in Wind River, right? There were scenes where information had to be imparted,
Right.
but it was always information in the greater story of that area, the history of that area, the what's happened to indigenous people in the 21st century. And it's one of my favorite films actually.
Yeah, Wind River is a fantastic film. It
And
really,
super heavy film, but it's a genre film,
yeah.
and within the genre, it's the di if you go and listen to the dialogue in that, it's really conversational rather than informational. It's music rather than information,
Mhm.
even though it's all about solving a mystery. So that's what I would do with dialogue. Some people write lots of dialogue and are really good at it and are really good at musical things. The actors I've worked with, they love the music because they can play the music they can act the music. And a guy like Robert Duvall would. I once met with him in a hotel, very crowded hotel bar in LA. We were meeting with him for some reason, and he started playing the part of a Southern preacher. He just started riffing on a Southern preacher in this super crowded room, very noisy room, and he was doing it very quietly to us. And by the time he'd finished riffing, the cadence and the not the information of what he was saying, but the cadence and power of how he was saying it made that room a completely quiet room.
Wow. Wow.
It was just amazing. Think about the music of dialogue.
Okay, I will.
Um, yeah, yeah.
Golly, that would have been pretty amazing to experience.
It was incredible. And then he stopped and he did this character. He went into character, did this character, and then was done. And the room got loud again.
Someone bring me a beer.
Yeah, kind of
Yeah.
something like that. Or
So when
Jim,
you from there, like you said earlier about loving the idea, and I think I would ask you that next question, balancing the personal inspiration with what might resonate with an audience. Like, how do you get into those general ideas that then you have to partially push through the genre structure?
part of the answer is that goes back to your taste bank, right? Is like how you've developed taste based on what you've watched and read. And does it fit with what you've loved in some way? Not that you're redoing what you've loved, but there's a pattern, right, that gets followed. And the other thing is, I love genre. I think genre is really helpful. The and you'll If you like genre and follow genre, I think it makes your job a lot easier. It's a pattern to follow, and you can violate it if you need to, but genre convention and genre movies help you decide how to craft your story. So I love that. You need to like the genre. You need to know the genre. You need to know what's required at this point in the story in this genre. So I use genre a lot. The big ones were always westerns, thrillers. Almost everything needs to be thrilling at some
Sure.
level. Even if nothing ever happens, it still needs to be thrilling. So yeah, that idea has to be filtered through a genre template in a way.
One movie of yours that I noticed on that I loved, which I was going to ask you about, the Book of Eli, like how that
Yes.
worked, because you rewrite or revise? What did
I
your involvement with that look like?
the movie is the draft I wrote.
Okay, okay.
And I'm still bitter that I was not given credit for that by the guild.
Really?
Yeah. Basically, I this was right after Sherlock. It was a Warner Brothers film, and I was approached to take this incredibly original but messy draft by the original writer, whose name I'm blocking right now, and turn it into a movie with the Hughes brothers. And I did. And Denzel Washington and then Gary Oldman came on board, and I kept reshaping it for the different actors as they got cast. And so basically, the structure, the scenes, the dialogue, everything is what I wrote.
Wow, that's
Yeah, definitely off of the first draft.
sure.
The concept and the world building were the first draft for sure, but it wasn't makeable.
So when you were because when early in our conversation when we were talking about it being a great draft, how is it that happens in terms of the original writer where maybe that's just the chasm between good and bad is that somebody can turn something in. How did they get their hands on that story to where you had to rework it so much?
I think they'd had these brilliant ideas. I changed a lot of the characters one way or another, or not the, though not the character of Eli, and not the twist of it being a Braille Bible and him being blind.
Yeah.
But that was all in the first draft. Those ideas were all in the first draft, but it was unmakeable and structurally a mess. And so I just worked very closely with the directors and Denzel and pretty quickly wrote the draft that then just got shot. So it was very satisfying for that.
Yeah.
But
I love that movie.
yeah, me
Gosh.
too. And I wish I'd got credit. I wish my name was actually on it.
Is there anything you can do like when it comes to
Uh,
stuff like that?
yeah, no, you can appeal. And there were very strict rules. At other times, I would definitely have been given credit for it. It is what it is. I still am very proud of it. I worked in prep. I was there in prep. I still am good friends with Alan Hughes, and I think it's a fantastic film.
Yeah, it is. I saw it in
Uh,
theaters, and that was where I fell in love. I like similar to you was just watching movies and being in high school. It was actually when the Blu-ray players came out, I made a big
Right.
fuss about the HD, and I think Book of Eli was like the first Blu-ray I bought for my 1080p television.
Yeah.
But gosh, seeing
Um,
that movie in theaters, I sat just 3 rows back, and
yeah.
when he pulls at the beginning, when he pulls the bow back, just seeing that in the widescreen was just, I felt
Oh,
like the
yeah.
arrow was coming straight at me.
Oh,
You
it's
know,
fantastic.
it was fun.
And that sword fight under the bridge.
Yes.
So we were working on a scene, not that scene, in a hotel room and working on the dialogue and the logic of the scene. And while we were working, Denzel was just rehearsing that sword fight, stroke by stroke, step by step. And people don't understand how athletic actors are, even if they're not athletes. They reproduce their movements
Mm.
again and again exactly and hit their spots exactly so that you can edit the scenes together. And that sword fight under the bridge, I saw him, he might have had someone coach him on it, but he was rehearsing what he'd been taught or what he'd decided to do. And it was amazing watching him just get it into his sense memory.
Yeah.
And then there it was under the bridge, and I saw it exactly, sword stroke for sword stroke.
I love the way the way that was presented as well. Like the violence was still there,
Yeah,
but it wasn't gratuitous in the sense that it was just over that you could clearly see what was occurring. But I think that's what I really loved about Book of Eli so much. It's a very classy film for the
very
subject matter.
classy.
It is. It's got that. It does have a Hollywood feel. The subject matter, in my opinion, is not something explored too often in
No,
films. But I would say that it's a Christian film, and it's the way it was done is I didn't know you could do that with that kind of subject matter.
yeah, I would say that it's a spiritual film.
Sure.
It's about maintaining a life of the spirit after the apocalypse, right?
Yeah.
And it's the Bible, so it's Christian in that respect, but I saw it in a more general way as well. And it was very interesting once. So no matter what, as a writer, no matter how deeply you think your characters as a writer, once an actor gets hold of them, you realize that you haven't gone deep at all
Yeah.
because they focus only on their character generally. And so once Oldman came on board and he was the king of that world, he would call me up and go, just ask me random questions where I knew he was getting into his character. He'd call me and go, Tony, it's Gary here. Do I shave? And be like, okay, you're the only guy in the universe who shaves. You're the only guy with soap. You're the only guy with a razor because you're the king. So yes, you shave, but you're
Yeah.
the only guy who shaves.
And not
So
only do you
I had
shave,
never,
someone else shaves you.
so I hadn't, I'd never thought of that. Do I shave?
Yeah.
But of course, it tells you everything you need to know about his position in that society.
See, I'm doing exactly what you told me to do. It's like I
But
just felt inspired to somewhere I feel like you could structure some dialogue around that question. Do you shave? And then just unfold character through that.
no, it was amazing. It was
Yeah,
amazing.
that is amazing. And
Yeah.
everybody I've spoken to has said the same thing, where it's like you really, actors are probably the best litmus test for your story because you might be thinking, again, genre convention, you might be thinking plot and this and that, but they're thinking character. They are thinking what is going to make these people interesting and why.
And also what they're thinking is why am I saying this line?
Yeah,
Why am I saying this line before that line? That doesn't make sense. I wouldn't know this to ask that before I know that down there. And you think you've got this beautiful scene, and then it just rips apart. It gets ripped apart and remade so that it works for the usually for the star, right? Everyone else fits in with that. But it's once you get over and you better, if you want to have a movie career, you better get over the shock of being of your
torn.
torn apart on a daily basis. But once you get over the shock and you go, it's really fun. It's the very beginning of a script and the very end when you're working with the actors are, to me, the most fun parts of the whole process.
Yeah,
Everything else in between is a grind. But when the actors make it come alive and they're good actors, I've been lucky enough to work with some really good actors. It's just amazing. And the other thing, and I'm sure other people have told you this, the other thing is that you think a line means this, and just in the way it's delivered, it means something completely different.
yeah,
And you're like, oh, I didn't know that's what we were doing.
yeah.
You
It's
know,
just
it's
that
just amazing.
inflection.
It's inflection. Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
Cadence, the kind of even just the speed with which it's delivered, the words are said,
yeah,
changes everything.
yeah,
So
definitely.
it's really exciting.
That maybe going into character, that the last question I
Yeah.
have for characters and relationships is backstory. Because Gary Oldman asks you that question, do you delve into the idea of backstory to try to pull out some sort of motivation as a writer, or
Yes, you do, but I've never found it useful to write a biography of my character before I write my character. You have a sense, I have a few lines, I have a few things, but those sort of very detailed backstories that some people do, it's like treatments. I find them stultifying in a way, is that they fix what you've got before you do it. They as in fixative, not as in repair. And for me anyway, I know the writing's going well when it's not being obedient to what I thought it was supposed to be.
okay, okay,
And that a treatment, you have to do treatments, and if you've got a writer's room and you're keeping a series going and things like that, then you have to stick to what the treatment wants. But when you're writing a first draft, I think it's a mistake to limit yourself to what you've already thought about a character. And because you discover you've got a question about theme or something
hmm,
somewhere, what's that you discover that in the writing in a way, or you think it's one thing and you have to be open to the fact that you're wrong, that it's actually something else,
yeah,
and that emerges. And that sort of process of discovery, I think, is what makes a piece of writing exciting
yeah,
rather than a piece of writing be predictable. Yeah, backstory, you need to know something. I don't think you should
everything.
put a pin in it and put it in a glass case.
Yeah. So too, have you ever has it ever happened in your writing where the story as it starts ends up being about some another character entirely? Have you started with a character and thought, you know what, actually this is becoming somebody else's story?
Yes, and so usually that means it's a failed to me it's a failed script or at least a failed concept. Not so much one character to another, although characters become more prominent. Characters are again about the music in a different way. That it's about balance, how you balancing the dynamic of all the characters. And some rise and some fall away completely, and some characters you thought were small actually end up being dominant in places that you never expected them to be. And you need to be open to that. But more than the characters for me, the answer to the question, what is this about, changes, usually change. You think you know what your story is about in the beginning, and at a certain point, you realize it's not about that, or it was about that, but now you've gone to a deeper place of what it's about. And you just have to be open to that. It's why the businessmen who run the business hate the creative process because it's not as predictable as they want it to be. And pretty much every movie on Netflix and Apple and all of that are the result of trying to be predictable. They're trying to deliver what worked before again and again because it's a different kind of audience now. And to me, none of that has been open to the surprise of what happens during the creative process.
It's also
Sadly.
interesting too that if you talk to just a general movie fan, the first thing they think about is not the writing process. I remember being that like the rare few that want to know how they're made. I was the same way. But most of the people I know that do love films, they don't think about screenwriting at all. It's just,
Because it's invisible in the
yeah,
finished product. You can see camera work. You and the actors, if they're good, if it's good, then people only see writing when the movie's not working. Then they say the script sucks.
yeah,
But no, most people don't know. It's like when you look at a house, you don't think about the architect's plans,
yeah,
which is to me the closest parallel to what screenwriters do, is they're the architect, but they're not the builder,
yeah.
and they're not the designer filling the house with stuff, unless it's Frank Lloyd Wright. But so yeah, I agree. People don't really know what the writing did. Was that line the actor or was that line the writer? The famous lines.
It's a great point. I
Yeah.
mean, would you say so? Thinking about that relationship, and this is a broad question, but when you're writing scene, what is your primary goal for scene? What is your general approach to a scene that is interesting enough to keep somebody hooked?
My primary goal with a scene is to make it dynamic enough to power you to the next scene, to make the next scene feel inevitable, because that's how you get narrative thrust or narrative drive. And going back to that David Mamet thing of ending early, how a scene, I'm always concerned about how a scene ends
Okay.
because it propels to the next scene. And different scenes do different things. Some scenes need information, and you have to figure out a way to get that information across entertainingly. Other scenes are all about character. Preferably they're both at the same time. Other scenes are just about lighting a fuse to action. Not all scenes are equal, and they're not supposed to do the same thing.
Or are you thinking of a cut process as well when you're writing visually, or do you try to stay out of that?
I'll sometimes ask for a smash cut, but usually by the time a screenplay's gone through the mill of notes, and if you're lucky enough, once you get a director and so on board, all of that stuff's gone.
Yeah.
So in general, you write a draft for a studio executive, and they really need to be helped as to what they're super lazy and they're not very good at reading script, making an effort to see what you're doing behind the words.
Yeah.
So you have to help them with that. And then once that has worked, then the script gets pared down till I don't know if you've ever seen a shooting script. The script that's used on set, there's no description, there's no emotion. Everything, it's just what's said and what's done. There's dialogue and there's action. There are
Gotcha.
no transitions, but you can't start that way. I don't think. You've got a different series of readers along the way.
The idea of show don't tell, which is obvious, but
Yeah.
also there does have to be a certain bit of maybe your own flair of narrative cadence to help at least inform the mood of the scene and things like that. And so as you're moving to the development process and you already know that, that would make sense that we don't need this, right? We already
Right.
know from through this process this is what we're going for. So let's just thin it up a bit. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it does. And often just the way you structure your scenes will say that without saying that, where your
Yeah.
pauses are and that sort of thing. Yeah, to go full circle on this, every scene is different. Every scene has a different function. They all have to work together to propel the story and propel themselves from one scene to the next.
How
And
do you
then
know?
the director and editor are going to change all that anyway. They're going to rearrange the scenes. They say a movie is written three times by the writer, by the production, and by the editor, by
Yeah.
post-production. And that's why they don't really often don't resemble what was written, because
Yeah.
they're written at least twice more.
It's also another role in film that is respected. Editing is so important.
Oh,
Like,
oh,
good grief.
I,
Editing is one
I,
of those things that there's so much that can be brought out in the story that I've learned in editing. We film commercials and we've done small documentary work, and the editing process is something I love because you might find that there is a beat, there is a pause, there is something that can help the scene along in terms of its pace and its mood that you didn't necessarily think about when
And
you're filming.
also the other thing is, oh, we don't need this line. The dog running
Yeah,
across the road said everything, or
yeah,
whatever. Boom, out.
yeah.
You know,
It's amazing how
It-
much you're just cutting.
yeah, it is. It's what they said about Michelangelo, right? About the sculpture of David is that he said, all I'm doing is removing the stuff that's not important. And that's what the process does, is remove the stuff that's not important. And then sometimes you get into post-production and like your single the line you love most in the movie is not there.
Yeah.
And you're like, they didn't need it.
So if I say the word catharsis to you, curiously, what does that word to you mean? What terms do you think of? What are you trying to accomplish when with your engineering emotional response in films? Does catharsis, is that a word that comes to mind for you when you write? How do you know when you've hit that just that emotional weight? It's such a hard question to ask.
I'm simple-minded, so no, it doesn't come to mind,
Okay.
except in this respect. I, for me, an entire screenplay is about how people feel when they walk out of the movie theater. What have you left with them? And that's catharsis.
Sure.
So I am aiming at an emotion of whatever the emotion is. I'm aiming at the emotions I like when I leave a movie.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to do that for myself and for others. So yes, I'm always aiming for that feeling of satisfaction. I've just watched a film, small a film about Samoan culture filmed in New Zealand called Tina. It's
Yeah.
Tina, but there's an emphasis on the A. It means mother in Samoan. It's one of the most emotionally satisfying films I have seen in years. You cry from beginning to end, and it is an utterly cathartic film
Yeah.
in that respect. And so there's some stuff they didn't, there's some stuff in the film that was a little muddled and confused, but it doesn't matter because they got the emotions right
Yeah.
throughout. It's emotionally a really pure film. So if you ever get the chance to see it, it's a great lesson on how to write emotion.
Okay. Yeah. Do another
Write and
movie.
act, and part of writing emotion is casting, right?
Sure.
So
Yeah, that have you ever seen the movie 45 Years?
no.
Oh gosh, watch 45 Years. That
All
one
right.
is a you want to talk about an emotional, weighty film. It's about I think it's Charlotte Rampling.
Oh,
Just a fantastic film about a marriage of 45 years. And gosh, that's
oh,
another one of those films that is it hits you.
yeah,
Every
but
single thing about it. So I'm gonna
oh, all
watch
right.
that one.
I'm a big Charlotte Rampling fan, so I will find it.
Okay,
And
cool. Okay, going the original things we were talking about that it is a discovery process. It's always hard for me to like when you first start writing, you do see the general like the graphs and the diagrams and like you're talking about the genre structure and stuff like that. And but you can't really, like you said, every story is so different. It is actually hard to talk about screenwriting in a sense because it is so transient.
it's hard to think about it if you're trying to make it into something predictable and reproducible, which the industry wants to do.
Yeah.
And it has to work. It has to be 90 minutes. It has to be three-act structure. We've just trained to that. It doesn't have
Mm.
to be, but you're better off if it is, or something like that, close enough. If you're writing in a genre, it has to follow the genre conventions to an extent, right?
Mm.
Follow or violate consciously, but with knowledge.
Sure.
But to me, it's still in the beginning and at the end, it's still storytelling. And you have to tell a good story. If you read to your kids, they're ruthless. If something's boring, they're not thinking about the book's feelings, the writer's feelings, they're just bored.
Yeah.
And it's the most honest feedback you'll ever get. If your kid starts doing their Legos instead of listening to the story's not working
Yeah.
for them. They're a great test.
Yeah, for
And that,
sure.
and that kid mind is a great test. You ask, do you outline? And I do to an extent, and usually my outlines work backwards. I
Okay.
always know, going back to catharsis, I always know, I want to know first how something ends. Endings, good endings are hard to come by. Good beginnings are a dime a dozen.
Right.
You can begin a story in all sorts of ways, but the ending that really punches is hard to find. So I usually work my way backwards. If I've found an ending I like and I look for endings, it's my little obsession is
Mhm.
endings. And I look for endings and then I work backwards on in terms of plot. How do
I,
I
you
get
know,
to this? How do I get to this ending?
I know you've got your YA series right now, which I still have not gotten to, but we are going to read them as a
Oh,
family since I saw that.
how how old are your kids?
I've got five,
How,
11, 9, 8, and 1. So two 11-year-olds, 9, 8, and a 1-year old, 2-year old in February.
yeah, you can probably read. You can definitely read them to the 11-year-olds if they're reasonably lit. The stories have some darkness
Sure.
and but they're about resilience in kids and about they're dis they're fairly subversive in some ways in a very disguised ways, but most of all, they're just ripping yarns. They're page turner. You
Yeah.
get to the end of the chapter and you have to read the next one. So
They're not fantasy, are they? They're
no,
ma
not well. They are in the sense that there's sorcery in them,
Okay,
but
okay.
they set on Earth. They set on Earth with people, so it's called high fantasy in recognizable geographies. At a time, they set in the time between the end of the Age of Stone and the beginning of the Age of Metal. A small mountain village and a giant trading city, sort of modeled on medieval Timbuktu, is are the two great settings with journeys in between. It's world building, but it's not, there are no aliens, there are no,
Yeah,
and there's just human-based sorcery, which you may or may not think still exists in the world.
yeah.
And it speaks to that. But it's the kids are incredibly tough and resilient and resourceful and completely out of their depth and learn to function in a place that they have no basis for knowing other than stories of. So they're good. The 11-year-olds, I think, will love them just
Awesome.
because and they're packed with action.
Cool.
You know?
So
Yeah.
you obviously you like it seems like you like stories of resilience. Like I haven't looking through your body of work, like everything of yours that I've seen at least, Invictus, Book of Eli, Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah.
I do walk away feeling great after I've seen your films.
That's cool. That's nice to know. Yeah, the world is full of wonderful things and bad things, and you have to
Mm,
be able to deal with both in order to lead a joyful, fulfilled life.
yeah.
So I try and write those stories. I do not believe in despair. I don't want to leave, I don't ever want anyone to leave any story of mine feeling despair
Yeah, hopeless.
and
Yeah.
hopeless, nihilistic despair. It just doesn't interest me. So,
Either. And I
uh,
think there's too much of it
yeah,
right now. I
agreed.
think there's
Yeah,
way too much of it.
not to go to politics, but it's been used as a tool
Yeah.
to manipulate people's responses and emotions. And so, no, there is great, even though there is darkness, there is great joy in my books, and there is
Good.
no despair whatsoever.
Good.
So I hope your kids love them.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. We'll sit down and knock them out. We're big readers, so you can't see it, but I have books all over our house. It's just
right,
crazy.
us
We're always
too.
reading.
Yeah, so they're middle school books. So are the 11-year-olds sixth grade?
Yep, they just started middle school.
Yeah, so it's perfect for them. But
Very cool.
if kids are readers already, then I've had kids as young as 7 love them, but they were super readers.
Yeah.
And then the
My
dirty,
son is.
yeah, okay. So,
He's a super reader. He might not be able to sit down with the sense of the patience, but if I sit there and read it to him, he will absolutely be able to appreciate it. But he's very bright.
oh, it will appeal to him. He'll resonate. I also, my principal characters are a brother and a sister. I've always wanted to write stories that boys like because the general consensus is that boys don't read.
Yeah.
but give them something to read and that they like, and they do. So I've tried to do both. I've got a very conscious mix of all kinds of characters.
Yeah.
And then the dirty secret is that adults really love it. It's very layered. Teachers find it very teachable, whatever that means. And it's just that you can pull the themes and the characters out and
Yeah.
pull the books apart. But adults like them because they're dark enough and layered enough. And there's
I will
adults.
definitely read them
Yeah, cool.
because I love reading children's and YA fiction.
Yeah, yeah,
It's almost like I did it for a while. When I started picking writing back up, I used it really to blow out the pipes, just
yeah.
kind of get my creative juices flowing again. And the adult life is so rigid.
And really, honestly, the my book agent said the only difference between young adult fiction and all other fiction is that young adult fiction does not subscribe to despair.
Yep.
So, oh, that's what I want to do. Hey, before we end, you just going to some of the stuff about writing the draft and revision and refinement.
Yeah, yeah.
How do you keep yourself from losing steam, or and do you aim for momentum? The same question, really, is that I write every day. When I'm on a project, I write every day. And some days you just can't. But the I was taught at the University of Cape Town by a Nobel Prize winning author, as it turns out, called J.M. Coetzee, who and he said to me, look, you don't have to write every day, but every day you don't write makes not writing the next day easier. And so for momentum is just keep writing every
Yeah.
day. Don't write yourself out. There's an Ernest Hemingway piece of advice that I use religiously when I'm trying to get through a draft, which is you always stop writing for the day before you are finished. So leave yourself a paragraph or a sentence for that you're going to write for the next day. You just never want to sit down and go, now what? Because that stalls you. You always sit down knowing exactly what you're going to write for the first sentence. That's all. And that keeps you going. It's amazing how that maintains momentum. And so it's just that's the work part of it. The professional part of it is even if you're not feeling it that day, even if you are probably going to throw away what you write that day, still keep going. Even if you're going to throw it away, because what J.M. Coetzee says, it's easier and easier to not write if you stop. And you never know what you find. Sometimes you just need to a half an hour and then suddenly you're flowing. Half an hour of struggle and suddenly you're flowing. Your expectation for that block of hours is your writing.
Yeah.
It's not like you're writing if you feel like it. And because writing is rewriting, right? You talked about revision and refinement. First drafts are wonderful because they're exploration drafts, but really they're not. The second draft and the third draft are far more important. They're the refined drafts. They're the what people are going to see. And so if you don't want to write until everything's perfect, you're never going to get to revise. You're never going to finish. And it was one of the first things I learned at film school, where there were all these people around me much more talented and knowledgeable than I was, and they could never finish. They were like, it's not perfect. This isn't perfect. I can't do this. And not just scripts, but small movies and all of that. And at a certain point, you go, oh, okay, in this world, in every task, there are people who can finish and people who can't. And no matter what the talent is of the people who can't finish, if it's not finished, it doesn't exist.
It's not real.
No, it's not real. So you've got to do that. So we've saved no time at all to talk about the most important part of the process, which is revising,
Yeah.
reading out loud. Once you've got that draft, read it out loud, man, to whoever you trust to listen to you, and you're not really reading for their feedback. You'll get it and you listen to it, but you're reading for what it feels like when you read it. Especially a screenplay, because all of that stuff happens in screenplay time, in real time. Those scenes are going to play as you read them in a way, the dialogue, obviously differently with the actors. And so you keep, as you're reading it, you keep your description to a minimum and you just read these scenes and you'll soon know what to fix. You'll,
Yeah, absolutely.
you'll train your ear to go, oh, ooh, okay. And as I'm reading, I'll just write a big note like the inevitable CDB, which is could do better, and or a big line through it.
It's been very helpful, Tony.
Yeah, my
I
pleasure.
appreciate it. This has been
Yeah,
very
yeah.
fun. Anything else you want to touch on, or you want to wrap up and maybe get your day started? I know it's in the morning over there in Hawaii.
I know it's in the morning. No, I've given myself the day off. It's
Okay,
Friday.
very
It's
nice.
Friday.